Okay, go to geni.us/blind spots to get the book. And one of the topics you write about is eggs, right? You write about eggs, and I still just sat next to somebody. Actually, I still talk to people all the time. Just sat next to somebody on an airplane who told me she went into the doctor. She was diagnosed with diabetes. And I said, I asked her about, like, does she eat a lot of carbs and sugars? And, what about eating, more protein and eggs? And she's like, well, I can't eat eggs. My doctor told me I can't eat eggs because I have high cholesterol. And I was like, you need to, I gave her a couple ideas for books. And it's shocking to me how many doctors still repeat this idea that eggs are so bad for you and they are going to spike your cholesterol. And also, like, the idea that cholesterol is so bad for you too. Like, I've read a couple books that make the argument that our brains need cholesterol, and there's a lot of nuance to that issue. So can we talk about that and then go into this story that you pointed me to here on New York Post? Harvard medical student ate over 700 eggs in a month and his cholesterol levels actually dropped. Should we start with the issue of cholesterol or talk about this story first?
Yeah. So, look, the great irony of how the medical establishment got everyday Americans to tiptoe around cholesterol when buying their food and choosing food. The great irony is that cholesterol that you eat is not absorbed by your body. 90+% of it goes right through your system. And that's because it's esterified. That is, it's bound to a bulky side chain. The cholesterol in your cell, and we have cholesterol in every cell in the body, is made by your body. It's made in the liver. So this is an amazing irony and a good example of how groupthink took on a life of its own. So the idea that you need to avoid cholesterol has never been supported by science. It makes no sense. It's illogical. And yet it's been the number one health recommendation put forth by the medical establishment for the last 60 years.
Why?
You come into
Why do you think?
It was really, I think, a dogma that began with Dr. Ansel Keys in the 1960s after Eisenhower had his heart attack. And he said, well, he had too much cholesterol and too much saturated fat. And he demonized saturated fat. And then he lobbied the American Heart Association to get on board, and the Surgeon General and the government and the food pyramid. And it was a bandwagon effect. And no one stopped to say, could we all be wrong? And in fact, 3 major studies were done to try to prove that saturated fat causes heart disease. None of them found that association to be true. But it took on a life of its own. So when people have come into their doctor for the last 60 years, the number one health recommendation we tell people is, well, try to eat better. And if you ask, how do you define try to eat better? We say, well, avoid cholesterol and saturated fat. And we have had this massive blind spot around ultra-processed foods,
Right,
seed oils, and pesticides. If pesticides are killing pests, what are they doing to our microbiome? That is the lining of our GI tract with millions of different bacteria that are involved in digestion and immunity. So we've had this massive blind spot, and the group think that cholesterol was the demon of Western civilization really had never had any basis to start with.
I think I need to get this guy, Nick Norwitz, on my channel, but I'll play this video without the sound on while we're talking. So 720 eggs, 133,200 milligrams of cholesterol, did not increase his cholesterol. He's saying, oh, there he's in front of Vital Farms eggs. That's what I eat. They just went up to over $10 a dozen, but we have our own chickens now, so we don't have to buy Vital Farms anymore. But I got to say, it's a great product. So it says it shockingly dropped nearly 20% over the experiment, eating 24 eggs a day. Norwood says his dietary intake of cholesterol more than quintupled, but his LDL cholesterol dropped. So it's interesting to me, first off, that a medical student did this to just, that maybe medical students are starting to catch on and say somebody's got to do something to get the word out that this, like you said, it just continues to get repeated by doctors. But where are they learning it? And he's in medical school, so we'll see if anybody listens to him. what do you think about a medical student going out and doing that? And what is medical school like for medical students if they feel like they got to eat 720 eggs to prove a point? I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, is that how hard it is to make a point that's different for professors in medical school, that a student has to go to that? Not to even mention the cost. If those are the eggs that he ate, that's that's many hundreds of dollars of eggs.
Yeah. Hopefully Vital Farms is reimbursing him or donating those eggs.
Right?
But look, we have a culture of obedience where it's very rigid in medical school and in the medical culture from day one. You're basically told, don't ask the big questions, put your head down, focus on memorizing and regurgitating. You got to learn all these medications, and people come out with a reflex. And we are kind of told to dismiss the big questions. I remember in med school learning that the age of puberty goes down by a week and a half every year, and has for the last 30 plus years. And I thought, gosh, whoa, before we go on, like, this is like an existential threat. Like, what's going on here? And someone threw some, lip service to, well, it's in the environment. And I find out later that pesticides and other food ingredients, including food dyes, have hormonal properties. And just so quickly it's dismissed, and it's put your head down, focus on what we tell you to focus on. But we need big ideas, and I'm glad Nick did this at Harvard Medical School. Peter Attia has also done this. He didn't eat 700 eggs, but this has been well known. I wrote about this in the book. It's been well known that dietary cholesterol does not increase your lipoprotein levels. And so we need big thinkers. We need people willing to challenge deeply held assumptions. We need people to zoom out and look at the macro. Maybe we need to treat more diabetes with cooking classes instead of just throwing insulin at people. Maybe we need to talk about school lunch programs, not just putting every kid on Ozempic. And maybe we need to talk about environmental exposures that cause cancer, not just the chemo to treat it. We've got to start thinking big. We can't just be in this billing coding treadmill that we're in medicine. I love being a doctor, but we've done a terrible thing to doctors. We've told them, put your head down, focus on billing and coding and short visits, and we're going to measure you by your throughput. We are not going to innovate. We have the most medicated population in the history of the world, and sickest. And what path are we on? We're not on a good path. We've got to take a step back and ask the big questions about the root causes of our epidemic of chronic diseases that is increasing every year.
Mm-hmm. All right. In a second, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about, number one, why do you think there is groupthink in the medical world, other than the fact that everybody's got that issue in whatever industry? I was a journalist in television news for a long time. It's definitely rampant there. But I think newsrooms tend to attract people who have a little bit of a messianic complex to them. They like to think that they're there to save people and stand in between, evil and good, and be the bridge for this. And so, just curious, like, if there's anything similar to that. If you are somebody, however, who wants a great cod liver oil that is mixed with a concentrated butter oil. I've been taking this now for over a decade. Really helps with dental health. My dad is an orthopedic surgeon. He started taking this to reverse his need for root canals, and has been on it ever since. In fact, his house flooded with the hurricane, and he told me on the show that he was still taking his cod liver oil, despite the fact he had no power and no refrigeration anymore. But he got his generators hooked up, so that's good. Anyway, if you go to greenpasture.org and use promo code Allison, click on the fermented cod liver oil, concentrated butter oil blend. That's what I take. And I like the gel, though they do make capsules. And we take the cinnamon tingle flavor. That's my favorite, but they have chocolate and unflavored. They also have droplets. It's a great product. It's based in the research of Weston A. Price. He was a dentist at the turn of the century. He looked at the reasons why people might be getting cavities with industrialized food. Greenpasture.org, promo code Allison. Okay, so let's go back to the groupthink question. And I would like your theories on not just what I asked about, like, why it seems like there's so many doctors that are still, like we just see the medical kind of, I guess if you call it the medical establishment, still repeating these same lines. Like I said, I sat next to somebody on the airplane that was telling me their doctor was going to do something that's probably really bad for her health. Statins, for instance, that I hear about all the time. And And then also, what why does some doctors feel like it's their job to really pounce on other doctors who question this stuff? Like there seems to me kind of a mean girl complex, and journalists do it too. And like I said, maybe it's just a human problem. It's not something that's unique to any particular industry. But yeah, why the group think, and then why also, instead of just being like, well, I think this way, I agree with the consensus, why does it seem like other doctors are constantly, that we see out there in the public, especially over the last few years, just really trying hard to ostracize the other doctors who have questions about what they're thinking?
Well, I think, look, most doctors are good people trying to do their best, but there is this contingency in medicine, and they control a lot of these sort of leadership roles where they believe in policing what doctors are saying. And that is very dangerous. They perceive that they have a monopoly on the truth, that they've trademarked the correct recommendations, and no one else is allowed to challenge that. And it is really modern day sort of dogma that rules. Now, we've got a healthy discourse around a lot of topics in medicine, but in other topics, we've got political apartheid. If they sense that you're saying something that could be consistent with one of the political agendas that they do not like, and by the way, it tends to only go in one direction, then you're dismissed. You can go here, but you can't go here. You can be on this panel. You can be a part of this committee, but not that committee. And so it's a very scary time. And it's not just in medicine. We see it in so many areas of society. Leon Festinger, the psychologist who described cognitive dissonance, really established this notion as a part of the human tendency that we just tend to believe what we hear first, not because it's more logical or scientific, but just because ideas like to settle and nest in your brain. And the human condition is such that it will go through acrobatics to dismiss new information or reframe it to make it fit what you already believe, just so you don't have to do the hard work of abandoning what you believed first. And that cognitive dissonance is true not just in medicine, but it's true in politics. I mean, why do 90% of people have the same political party affiliation of their parents? It's what they heard first, right? Are people thinking independently? The power of groupthink or the herd mentality is common in society and has for all of history. But the father of modern medicine said, we all have to recognize that we have our biases and then temporarily suspend those biases as we consider new information so we can be as objective as possible.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what you think about the role of the news media, since we're talking about how I came from these TV stations. A lot of times there's just an acceptance, I guess, that if a hospital sends you a press release, the hospital knows everything about a particular topic, and it's just repeated almost like stenography. There's not a whole lot of questioning, in a large part because reporters don't know what they're talking about. So they just assume, and they don't have the time. Like you brought up the fact that one of the real problems in medicine is systematic with how a doctor is forced to practice in a lot of ways due to the business side of it all. And the same thing in journalism. It's like a factory farm of information. You're barely able to make your deadline. You're certainly not able to make your deadline while thinking critically about a particular issue. You might be able to run down to a house that caught on fire and report about why it caught on fire. But when it comes to complex issues, there's no time, at least in television news. And I think it's probably starting to become the same in print and everything too. So there's that. And then that just keeps you from questioning things. But once you start to wake up, you realize, can I do real journalism in this system? And like for me, I realized that there was no way, unless I completely overhauled my job, that I was going to be able to maintain my integrity, because I was finally seeing what I didn't see. For many years, I was unaware. But then now, once I was aware, I had to get out. So what happens to the doctor that wakes up?
Well, a lot of doctors are waking up. A lot of doctors are sick of being on the hamster wheel. A lot of my medical students have no interest in practicing medicine in the traditional way. They want to redesign care. They want to be a part of something bigger. They want to be an entrepreneur and figure out how they can get people off of dialysis and come up with a business model for it. They don't want to be a part of the standard churn. They don't want to just be a cog in the wheel. And so it's an exciting time in medicine. And a bunch of us doctors now are going directly to the public to try to educate people about the truth about so many health topics where doctors got it wrong, groupthink got it wrong, or the media misrepresented things, or all of the above.
If you have not joined the Allison Wine Club, go to AllisonWinePromo.com. Here's how they pick these wines. They come from extremely remote regions of the world. They are from limited production vineyards, some 300 years old, families that are like multiple generations passed down old world winemaking techniques, Chile, Argentina, France, Spain, and they were selected because I like really clean products and they don't use any dyes or fillers, artificial stuff, natural fermentation practices. And we're talking about environmental toxins. These come from very remote regions and sometimes between 6,000 and 9,000 feet. So far fewer pesticides used in the area. And these are all small family operations really that would not otherwise be sold in the US because they don't do the volume, but Bonner Wine has made them available to us. You will get 6 bottles every 3 months, and you always have a gift on hand for that awkward cocktail party, holiday, person that you unfriended over something you heard on the news. Dr. Makary has changed your mind about. The person who, you were like, eggs are terrible for you. And then that person said, well, you can never come over here. And now you think eggs are great. So bring them a bottle of wine to have with their eggs, which would be weird in the morning, but maybe they have eggs for dinner. Okay, AllisonWinePromo.com. And also, don't forget, you can send me mail. P.O. Box 3355, Denellen, Florida, 34432. Love hearing from people. Notes of encouragement, support for the show, donations, loose pocket change, winning lottery tickets. Nothing creepy because my kids open them up on the way home, and nothing edible because I will assume you're trying to kill me. Maybe your peers will listen. I don't know. Maybe my peers will read your book and listen. We'll see. But Dr. Makary, thanks for coming on. Any final words?
No, thanks, Allison. This is great. Look, there's a revolution in medicine to finally start talking about the big topics we've not been talking about that we need to talk about, that are central to health: the microbiome, the poison food supply, the bad health recommendations that have created health crises out of thin air, everything from the food pyramid to bad guidance on hormone therapy for perimenopausal women to peanut allergy and cancer prevention. So there's a movement. It's exciting. Things are happening in medicine. And you're right. Trust in journalism is down. My family grew up with state-controlled television overseas. And when we came to the United States, we just assumed we were getting independent reporting and then, learn, hey, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was just government propaganda. That put my antennas up, and I realized, hey, corporate media has done some tremendous damage. And in medicine, we've had a tremendous decline in public trust. A study just came out in one of our big journals, JAMA, that trust in doctors and hospitals went from 71% just before the pandemic to 40%, a 31-point drop in trust in doctors and hospitals. And I can tell you, in my experience of being a doctor, if you are honest and transparent in real time with patients, they can be very forgiving. But we've not seen that humility from our medical leaders. So we need new, big ideas in medicine. We need a fresh, new way of thinking. And we need to see some humility from our leaders to win back some of that public trust.